Okay, well, once again, welcome everybody to this webinar. It's called Pilgrimage, Mission, and Care for Creation. And we're delighted to welcome you. This webinar is being organized by the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns. My name is Lisa Sullivan. I'm the Senior Program Officer for Integral Ecology with the team. And our office is located in Washington, but tonight we're joining you from Austin, New York, from Maryknoll headquarters, a very special and dear place to many of us. For me, it's a especially special place. It was here 42 years ago, around the same month that I began my journey as a lay missioner. I began my own pilgrimage as a lay missioner, going to Bolivia and later to Venezuela for many, many years. And then only recently, about 3 years ago, embarked on my return pilgrimage back to the Maryknoll family to join this amazing team at the Office for Global Concerns. So tonight, our invitation to you is to participate in a new moment of hope. I think, as we all know, hope seems to be in short order in our world today, in our country and all around us, on many, many fronts. And that includes on the front of the state of God's extraordinary creation. Daily and all around us, we hear the cries of the earth. We hear it crying out. I just took a quick look at my news feed today, and I'll share quick 4 headlines, just what's happening today. Hurricane Erin is approaching the coast of North Carolina and doubling the reach of a normal hurricane. 350 are dead in the monsoon flooding in Pakistan. A heat wave is bringing the hottest nights on record to the Middle East. And Spain's wildfires have triggered the largest ever deployment of the EU firefighting force. That's just one day. What our beautiful God's creation is experiencing. In addition to that, we often are finding a loss of hope in things such as what's happening in our own country here in the United States. We've witnessed the final steps to almost totally dismantle President Biden's historic climate bill. And currently, the EPA is trying to overturn the bedrock underpinning to all climate action. It's called the endangerment finding. And they're trying to overturn this as we speak tonight in these weeks. But there are also signs of hope regarding care for creation. Here in the US, in spite of tearing down at a national level of climate action, we're seeing a lot of climate action at local levels, state levels, an attempt to do as much as we can from the bottom up. One beautiful example among the Catholic community is in Florida, where the Pax Christi Florida community has been working hard to try to get their state legislature to pass the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. That's a great example. At the global level, there is also hope. We're seeing renewable energy literally bursting onto the global grid at levels that are far outpacing expectations, really especially led from China. The global temperature trajectory has slowed significantly from what it would have been had we not had the Paris Treaty. It would have been at this point about 4.5 degree raise in temperature. We're now at about 2.5. But of course, we need to bring it down to 1.5. Another sign of hope is that in spite of President Trump pulling the United States out of that treaty, the UN climate treaty, no other nations have followed suit. The others have remained. But the question still is, will the necessary climate action happen fast enough? Can we avoid one of the many possible tipping points that are talked about that could unleash action that there would be no turnaround from? A couple of those possibilities are the melting of the Arctic ice sheets, the collapse of the Amazon rainforest ecosystem. And so those are dangling in front of our eyes. And often it feels like diplomatic advances just cannot happen fast enough. Pope Francis, though, injected a whole new narrative of hope into the global climate action with his Laudato Si, showing us that the very essence of our faith calls each of us to care for God's extraordinary creation, to take action in our personal lives, in our community, in our nation, and our world. Over the past year or so, many Catholic organizations came together, including Maryknoll, to try to discern how can we work together to engage U.S. Catholics with this call of Pope Francis. And out of that discerning came the idea of pilgrimages of hope for creation. So tonight we hope to inspire you to join or to create a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage of hope for creation can be anywhere from 3 people to 300. It can journey around your schoolyard or around your city. It can go to a place of special beauty or a place of worrisome degradation. Pilgrimages can help share a new movement of hope, a movement that engages hearts and faith to move us to a positive tipping point, one that pushes the needle in the opposite direction to make sure that everything possible is done to save God's marvelous creation. So welcome to this journey. In this webinar, we will try to connect pilgrimage and mission spirituality. We'll share some personal stories of pilgrimage. We'll share experiences of mission and offer practical steps of how to join or organize a pilgrimage. And to start us off, I have the real joy of introducing someone who became a mentor, a guide, and a friend to me within my first really challenging weeks of taking on this role about 3 years ago. I've learned so much from her, and so it's a delight to introduce to you Marilyn Cott. Marilyn is a retired U.S. Air Force officer. She served as a Marino lay missioner from 2016 to 2019 in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where she worked in prison and homeless ministry. Marilyn currently is a Chicago Marino affiliate and does parish ministry, where her focus is on Laudato Si. She's a lifelong runner, although now she declares herself to be a walker. And one of the most moving places she has walked was the Camino de Santiago in 2015. Marilyn says she's still processing that beautiful event. And this evening, Marilyn will ground us in the spirituality of pilgrimage and mission. So welcome, Marilyn. We invite you to speak, and we have about 10 minutes.
Well, thank you for such a beautiful introduction and for the opportunity to share tonight. When I was asked to participate in this webinar by speaking for a few minutes on the spirituality of pilgrimage, I was absolutely honored, and I hope that anything I say tonight gives you some new food for thought as you contemplate pilgrimages of hope for creation, a very worthy project, and as Lisa said, organized by many U.S. organizations involved in creation care. It seems that it might be good to start by considering the question, what is pilgrimage? I think as I thought about that as preparing remarks, I thought in a suburban U.S. Catholic context, pilgrimage can often be the trip that you see offered in a parish bulletin. You sign up to go somewhere like Italy or Mexico, visiting important shrines, participating in prayer and the sacraments. You're in a group, and the hotels and airfares are worked out for you. Another form of pilgrimage is the one depicted in the 2010 movie The Way, which inspired a lot of us to go to Spain. But in the movie, Martin Sheen and some others find themselves accidentally walking the Camino de Santiago together. There's hardship, there's conflict and reconciliation, and in the end, they arrive at the cathedral in Santiago. Each of the pilgrims is changed by the experience, and despite the fact that it takes place in a somewhat secularized time and culture, God is there. There is also pilgrimage as something we witness from our Muslim brothers and sisters, the Hajj, with millions of the faithful making their way to Mecca every year. Make no mistake, pilgrimage is an important tradition in our faith. Abraham is a pilgrim, journeying from his home to follow God. The Jewish people are pilgrims, journeying from Egypt to the Promised Land. Jesus himself is a pilgrim, journeying from Jerusalem and ultimately home to his Father. There are countless tales of ancient and medieval pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, to Canterbury, Rome, or Santiago de Compostela. Pilgrimage was often assigned in the past as a penance, maybe it still is, so you can find an aspect of reconciliation along with it. On their journeys, these traditional pilgrims practiced simplicity, leaving behind the lives that they knew for a while and taking only what they could carry. They had to rely on God, their neighbor, and creation for whatever they needed. They endured hardship, the hardship of a life on the road in very different, often dangerous times. These examples of pilgrimage are amazing and big, and maybe they give a little insight to the spirituality, but they can distract from the fact that pilgrimage is not just for the very serious or very fortunate people, a once in a lifetime treat. It's something each of us can participate in every day, wherever we are. At its core, pilgrimage is a spiritual practice, a way of praying. It's something that happens to each of us every time, whether for a minute or for a month, one of us journeys toward God. Pilgrimage is also an important reminder that our whole life is meant to be a journey towards God. You often hear our lives described as earthly pilgrimages. Pilgrimage can help remind us of that fact and reorient us that each day, with every step we take one step closer to God. So how does this tie into this year's Jubilee of Hope? In the document, Hope Does Not Disappoint, issued for the 2025 Jubilee year, Pope Francis writes that pilgrimage is, of course, a fundamental element of every Jubilee event. Setting out on a journey is traditionally associated with our human quest for meaning in life. Pilgrims of Hope will surely travel the ancient and more modern routes in order to experience the Jubilee to the full, contemplating the beauty of creation and masterpieces of art. We are inspired to lift up that beauty in prayer to God in thanksgiving for his wondrous works. Pope Francis takes care in the same document to instruct on the need to make confession available to pilgrims. So again, we hear that reconciliation is something pilgrimage can help us with. And another point that the Jubilee Bull hints at, our pilgrimages are done in connection with Catholics all over the world and across time, whether on ancient or more modern roads, as described in the bull. A pilgrim is walking where someone else has been before and where others will walk in the future. We are connected with those who have come before us and those who will follow us.
Marilyn, I'm going to interrupt you because did you want to try to show your slides? They're not showing.
No, that's okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. Some people were asking.
I have one at the end. Yeah.
Okay, great. Just want to ask.
Okay. And then finally, in the Jubilee document, Pope Francis asks us not to be just recipients of God's grace and reconciliation, but to take the message of hope to others. So if pilgrimage is a spiritual practice rooted in our tradition, involving prayer, travel, and reconciliation, where the pilgrim journeys toward God, a pilgrim of hope is one who goes on to bring the good news to others. So how does this tie into Laudato Si? At its core, Laudato Si teaches of the need to be in right relationship with God, with our human brothers and sisters, and with the rest of creation. If we skip any of these, we stray from the path of life that God intends for us. We know that we have strayed as a people because humanity's break in these three essential relationships is showing itself now in the degradation of our environment. We are experiencing climate change, human poverty, and the accelerated extinction of species as a result of pollution and overconsumption. Reading the signs of the times through the lens of scripture and church teaching, Laudato Si asks us to repair those relationships, returning to God, imitating his love and generosity, and cooperating with him for the care of creation. Pilgrimages of hope for creation, then, generally conducted out of doors, are a way of renewing the paths of our own Christian lives while inviting others to the messages of Laudato Si, that is, reconciliation with all of creation and returning to God. So what can help us do this? You'll hear more about organizing pilgrimages of hope for creation later in this webinar, but at this point, I'd like to propose to you a few organizing practices, which again might help explain the spirituality. I believe that these can help us keep in mind that pilgrimages are a spiritual practice that differs a little bit from procession or maybe an outdoor prayer session, that they are not demonstrations, even though they are a form of witness, and that they differ from other outdoor experiences like hiking, fun runs, or walks that raise money for charity, as important as they all are. Here are 5 proposed practices. Okay, and here I'll go back to a slide. And hopefully it's not an eye chart. I would encourage you to incorporate, as you can, the opportunity for pilgrims to experience wonder and awe, And we know that being outdoors gives us that chance to experience nature more directly and to recapture the awe and wonder at all God has created and how magnificently it all fits together. When we see its beauty, creation's beauty, we can appreciate it, love it, and be inspired to care for it better. Silence and contemplation are really important. And when we get out there, we like to talk with our friends, and that's important, and we should do that. But make sure to build in a little bit of time, at least some time for silence and contemplation, where we can notice everything that's around us and we can listen to hear what God is calling us to do. Simplicity. Pilgrimage gives us the chance to practice simplicity, taking only what we need and giving thanks for it. For a few miles or a few days, we can see how little is actually necessary. Laudato Si calls us to live more simply, to reduce the burden to the earth, preserving it for others and for future generations. Finally, our pilgrimages can give us the space to contemplate the idea of ecological conversion. In Laudato Si, that is described by Pope Francis as whereby the effects of our encounter with Jesus Christ become evident in our relationship with the world around us. So pilgrimage can give us the opportunity to prune away the things that keep us from God, our human nature, and the rest of creation. And then finally, the call to mission, back to pilgrimages of hope and pilgrimages of hope for creation. As pilgrims who experience God's beauty and generosity while on pilgrimage, we can return renewed and ready to invite others to the same experience. Thank you so much for your attention and for attending this webinar. And I'd like to end by wishing you a buen camino.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. Thank you so much. And as of many months ago in working on the pilgrimages with you, I've really come to understand that sense of my life as a pilgrimage, and that just having that vision is something that's really helped me in so many ways. So thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from a delightful person who's been on our team this summer, and we're sadly saying goodbye to him in a few days. That's Mark Joyce. Mark is a program associate fellow for the summer with our Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns. Currently, Mark is pursuing his Master's of International Public Policy at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, SAIS. Previously, he spent time in formation as a seminarian with CICM, a Catholic missionary congregation, including 1 year in the Philippines. In 2021, before starting seminary with CICM, Mark walked the Camino de Santiago, which fostered his passion for pilgrimage. So welcome, Mark. And Mark is going to talk about his personal experience of pilgrimage. It's all yours, Mark.
Good evening. Thank you guys all for joining us. And so, as Lisa mentioned, I'm going to be sharing just stories from my personal experience when I hiked the Camino de Santiago as a way to kind of express what it's like to really engage with the spirituality of pilgrimage, and how it was very impactful for me at the time in my life when I did it. And so I at the time was working as a sales rep at a commercial real estate company. I started discerning a missionary vocation, and before I started seminary, I then went and hiked the Camino de Santiago. It took me about 29 days to get there, and while I was hiking, I had some great practical lessons, like Marilyn said, of connecting the pilgrimage journey, the short month journey, with my overall earthly pilgrimage. And then also just very important personal lessons for where I was at in my life, that I think is an aspect of pilgrimage, and something that can be used in this initiative is how do the lessons that you experience on your pilgrimage, how can that apply to care for creation? And so I'll go over 3 key lessons that I had and the stories that went with it. And so the first lesson that I learned from the Camino was just about encountering God, and it was especially through prayer. And so I was maybe 3 or 4 days in of my Camino at this time, and I passed the statue that's pictured here of Mary. And there was a story that went along where a pilgrim had passed this area, and he'd met a young girl named Maria, and he talked to her. She was kind, and that just clued into his thought that he should, pray for Mary, and he was exhausted. He wasn't sure if he would complete this day. He had blisters, and so he just started praying to Mary, and he felt this burst of energy, was able to get through the day, and made it all the way to Santiago, and was so thankful for that that when he finished it, he came back and built this statue here, and the people in the town nearby still come out and pray rosaries there. And so I saw this story. I was also feeling exhausted. I also had blisters. And so it reminded me to start praying the rosary and praying to Mary along the way. And this ended up being very impactful just because I would say the next week, it was almost like every day I could count just a single interaction where I called them, Marian encounters, where after a long day, one of the other pilgrims I was walking with came up to me and said, I got this at a church. I thought of you, and it was a prayer card for Our Lady of Guadalupe. The next day, it really was like the next day, I was walking, and I was used to these churches usually being closed if it wasn't around Mass, and I always wanted to go in them. They were usually beautiful when you got in, but I learned at this point that they were constantly locked. And so as I was coming up to this beautiful old church, assuming I wasn't going to get in, I then saw the priest come out of the rectory. He had keys, and I asked if he could open it, and he said, of course. And the church was, the Church of the Assumption. So that was the name of it. And so I walked in, and it had this beautiful artwork from Mary. And for me, it just felt like, it was an encounter with Mary. And so it was reminding me again and again to keep praying. And another time that week, I got to this new town and didn't know anything about it, was taking a nap, woke up, and another pilgrim I was walking with asked me if I wanted to go to an old historic monastery that was about uh, built in 800 AD, and it was where Mary appeared to a Spanish king. And so I had no idea, but I was just invited there. And so again, it was these encounters that felt as if they were a reminder that my prayers were being heard. And so one of the lessons I took from that was just in daily life, how important it is to prayer, but then also even in real life, you can have those encounters that remind you that your prayers are being heard and answered. So being more aware of God's presence, and in that case, it was a very condensed version of the beginning of my pilgrimage that was really showed me the power of prayer. So. Uh, the second big lesson, just for pilgrimage, is the need to overcome adversity. The idea of carrying a cross, and it's very clear when you're walking. Your feet hurt, your knees hurt, and life can also have hardships. But for my Camino, it was especially meaningful based on this tradition, the Cruz de Ferro, Iron Cross, and you're supposed to carry a rock the whole way. And when this is maybe 3 weeks in, you drop that rock, and that's supposed to symbolize it's at the top of the mountain, releasing your burdens. And so at the beginning, the first hostel I stayed in, the hostel owner told me about this tradition and gave me a rock to carry. And the whole way, I didn't really know what it was, but I was joking about it a lot. That I was starting seminary, so I have a lot to give up, and that will be the rock. But that about 2 days before I got to this, it was just a very strong moment. There was a group of people I was walking with, and we'd gone different ways. And so I decided to go to town. They decided to go further. And as I was walking into this town, and I'd been hiking with these people maybe for 2 to 3 weeks, and I was just feeling really down that I was going to now be going, I thought, on the rest of my pilgrimage on my own. And I started telling myself, like, I just met these people. Why am I feeling so sad? I'm about to go into seminary. It's with a missionary congregation. Their charism is that you leave your native land to be a priest. And so I was thinking, I'll be having to say goodbye to my friends and family as part of that journey. And instantly that feeling I had expanded to that whole feeling. And I just started crying, walking to this town. But then I realized those are important things to think about and to discern. And that's partly why I came on this pilgrimage, was to help me spiritually prepare for the next journey that I was going on. And so it was very meaningful for me to kind of have that experience and realize this is the real reason of why I was coming on the Camino. And, it's such a lesson on like particular to the journey, but then, expands out, and it was a valuable life lesson for where I was at. And so the third lesson that I learned was just the importance of community, but also particularly to the idea of mission. And so I started the pilgrimage just on my own, was hiking, and very soon I met groups of people. You'd pass them on the way on the trail, you'd stop for lunch, you'd have breakfast, and you'd see the same people that it really became a community going down together. And that within 3 days, I met 4 or 5 people from across Europe, each one a different country, but we all, the common language everyone spoke was English. And I walked all the way to Santiago with some people that I met day 2, and that was like 29 days. And so 2 of the people that were part of this group were Italians. And then as we went on, they continued to meet new Italians, and they would invite them to walk with us. And so that maybe by 2 or 3 weeks in, there were uh, 8 or 9 Italians with our group. Some of them didn't speak English, but they could all speak Italian together. And I started realizing that I walk differently than them because I like getting up early. I like to be out, as the sun rose. I like to be done at noon where I could have lunch, and I'd like to know where I was going to hike the night before when I woke up. And they didn't like hiking like that. They would get up later, maybe 2 or 3 hours later. They would stop, multiple times along the way and relax, and they wouldn't get finished until 8. And they didn't like to even think about where they were going until the morning when they started hiking. And so for me, I was then constantly at odds with that, and it was out of my comfort zone. And so I was contemplating hiking my own, and maybe 3 weeks in, I decided I would just hike their way. And so I did that. I got up late. The night before, we went to an Italian pizza place, and we sang Italian songs, and I didn't finish until 8 p.m. But after that, I was reflecting on it, and I realized that I got to know some of those Italians a lot better that day, because even though it was difficult when we were walking slowly, we try to communicate with a little bit of English here, some Italian, but just seeing them and seeing them laugh and singing with them, and in a lot of ways, that made me realize that's what mission is where when you go to a different country, cultures can act as different, rhythms of what time you eat, whether you do siesta, and that to really be closer with people, you have to walk their way, even if it's uncomfortable, and you can still then find ways to recharge. But that tension was another thing I realized of why it was important to be doing this pilgrimage, and then I was able to have these reflections based on where I was in my life, and it's one of the reasons that the Camino was a very valuable experience to do at that time. So that is my lessons. But for Lisa, whoever's next.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for so many things for this talk and for all you've been for us this summer. But you say the word pilgrimage, and Mark's eyes just always light up. It's something about his essence, and so it's just a joy always to hear your stories and see how it transformed you. I can really feel that so intensely. So thank you for sharing that. Next, I would like to introduce the Heidi Cernica. Also a good friend, a fellow lay missioner. Heidi's been a Maryknoll lay missioner for about 20 years. She's also an attorney. And for the past 6 years, she's served in El Paso, Texas. Before that, she worked with incarcerated women in Brazil and Kenya. And currently her mission in El Paso is with Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center that functions both in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. And there she works with survivors of human trafficking and other crimes who qualify for relief from deportation under U.S. laws, which are designed to protect victims. I need to also say that Heidi has also walked the Camino de Santiago, not once, but 1.5 times. So that's pretty extraordinary too. So Heidi's going to share some of her stories of from the border in some ways, or a different kind of pilgrimage. So welcome, Heidi.
Thanks, Lisa. And it's always great to see you also. Um, yeah, it's actually been almost 30 years now that I've been connected to Maryknoll. I'm a slow learner, I like to say. So, Lisa asked me to speak more to the question of how the reality we see here at the border speaks to pilgrimage, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit, and then I just have a couple slides, but they're more pictures of ways that I think we see that. Um, so when we think about pilgrimage, and I think Mark and Marilyn have dug into this and like very deeply, and I think a pilgrim is what? A pilgrimage is a search for more, for something deeper, right? In the case of migrants, I think it's for safety, for the life that God wants for us. Um, Often the people that I work with have a deep faith, and often pilgrims have a deep faith that compels them or leads people to find the courage to take the journey. Uh, and it's a constant reminder that courage doesn't mean you don't have fear. Courage means you keep going despite having fear, right? Despite Mark going off by himself to do this walk where he didn't know anyone. Um, and I think one of the other things we see here at the border is a community ready to receive and welcome people here in El Paso, at least. Also, the community here feeling compelled and a deep faith and life commitment. We know that the migrant journey continues after us. We know that we are a part of the journey. Very few people stay here. We're a step along the way. And it also feeds our own inner pilgrimages, all of those who are here and are working. If we think of a pilgrimage as a move towards God, towards healing, towards wholeness, towards life, towards nonviolence, towards creation, um, and you know, creation again, meaning so much more than plants, but life and growth. And you know, sometimes that means forest fires and pruning, right? Um, are the migrants making a pilgrimage, albeit sometimes not a voluntary one, right? I think they are. You know, they're seeking life and abundance. They're seeking safety. They're seeking a future. They're making a journey, and they're led by hope of things not seen. Um, they're often leaving, the people I'm working with are often leaving something that unknown, terrible thing or unknown thing that frightens them or has been violent for them. And they're often going towards something that they hope is more life. They journey with so many other people on the way. We're part of their journey. They journey with people on their way north. Um, as they continue on, the people I work with are strong, independent, courageous people, but they also rely on the support of others, sometimes the advice of others. I frequently ask my clients, Las Americas, where I work, is a not-for-profit, but I because of where they come from, I often ask my clients, you know, do you believe in something? Are you religious? Do you have a church that you participate in? And if they do, I engage them in those conversations. Um, Often when we think of a pilgrimage, we think of an intentional event, right? It has a start and a finish. You go to Lourdes, you go to Santiago de Compostela, you do the Hajj, right? You go to Mecca. But it's not really that moment. I mean, we all know that, right? All pilgrimages have preparation. They have repercussions. They open doors to a new moment in our lives. Um, this is one part of the pilgrimage. And then when I thought about like to tie it into this year of Jubilee and ecology and all of that, um, a lot of the people I work with, in some way, their choices to leave or they're being forced to leave is caused by climate issues, right? I remember a young man I worked with from Guatemala, Jose Domingo. He left because his family land was trying. A large company came in and took the land and the mining rights, right, to get to the ore underneath, poisoning the water and showing up with false deeds and saying, oh, I own this land. And so his family joined together with other families to try to defend their land. Some people in the other families were killed. Many people left. And so Jose Domingo came north as part of a person that was trying to protect his land, right? Um, Northern Mexico has become, I don't know if this is a word, but it's become desertified because we're so intent on controlling access to the Colorado River. I would say because we want lettuce all year round, right? So people may be leaving their land for economic reasons, but what's underneath the economic reason? Haiti is a perfect example. How many people have left Haiti because of environmental disasters? And then we think about like how many of these were avoidable, were human caused, and how many of them are part of the cyclic part of our planet. I've worked with people coming from African countries. I worked with a man from Nigeria once who went from rural to urban, right? There was a drought, the land was not farmable, also not a word perhaps, but the land was not farmable. And so his family moved to the city in an effort to survive. And then when the city became too violent or things happened in the city that they had to leave, then he came to the US. We're going to look in general, people that are looking at the reality of migration, we're going to look and say, he fled violence in the city, not recognizing that underneath that, he fled climate disaster. And so I started thinking about like, okay, so what are pilgrims, right? And one of the questions Lisa threw out was how does their treatment stand in contrast to how pilgrims should be received or could be received, And I thought, how are pilgrims welcomed at the Hajj, at Mecca? How are pilgrims welcomed in Santiago de Compostela, at Guadalupe, in Mexico City? Minimally, people are welcomed with respect, often with admiration, with cheers. Um, it's as if the people on those pilgrimages play within the rules, right? That someone has established about what's right and what's not right. How do we treat people fleeing environmental disaster and subsequent persecution when they ask for help and protection? What about when they demand their rights? What about when they demand change to policy, to mineral and water exploitation? Do our governments, do our country, do our societies treat people with respect and admiration as a whole? How are they seen differently as pilgrims when their pilgrimage is considered inconvenient by some people, right? We as a community need to be open, attentive, welcoming of each person's pilgrimage, each person's sacred journey. That was one of the reflections I came to when I was thinking about the whole idea of pilgrimage for migrants. And then lastly, like, what can we do, right? What can we do? Walk in someone's footsteps. I'm part of a group that goes out in the desert for search and rescue of migrants in distress and migrant remains. And so I'm like, how can we bring groups that come to El Paso to go walk in the desert and actually see what it's like, right? To feel the heat, to see how easy it is to get lost in the desert. We can pray for people. We can work for change. I just have a few slides, and they're mostly just pictures of that I want to share, hopefully. Now you get to see my capacity for advanced technology. Share. Or not. Okay, there we go. This is the desert. This is the desert that people are forced to walk through because we are not a welcoming community to pilgrims, migrant pilgrims. And I just thought, life and death, it's the journey, it's the landscape, it's the reality that we live with. These are places where we do our search and rescue. You can see the footprints. A shoe that we found, Father Yarrick, who joins us and then once a month comes back and says Mass and invites people to join for Mass in the desert. Some of the people I've worked with and how the journey never ends, right? from Brazil, Venezuela, Honduras, Mexico, Colombia, and then many of them were sent back to Mexico, Venezuela, Brazil. I'm gonna zip through that one since this is being filmed, but people who came looking for safety, looking for freedom, and then got deported even though they followed the rules, even though they did what they were supposed to do when they came here to ask for safety. And then there's the mass in the desert. And then the bottom is a woman that went from Venezuela to Brazil, actually, for her seeking safety. And I think I'm out of time, but I'm trying to think of one quick story. So people's journeys and, pilgrimage, I mean, anybody that's gone on a pilgrimage can say, like, it's not a straight line, right? So one of those pictures was a woman that I work with who came up to the US, got all the way here, asked for asylum, and then had a daughter who was 17 that she had to go rescue in El Salvador. And she said, I did what any mom would do. I left the United States and I went and got my daughter. And then she came back, and it took her a year to get back into the country to pursue asylum again. But they're pilgrims. We're all pilgrims, and how do we walk together on this sacred journey? Thanks. Back to you, Lisa.
Wow, that was very powerful, Heidi. So much going through my heart, through my mind, but unable to say it right now. But just thank you so much for those poignant stories and that question of who are pilgrims, and to take a whole different view of who might be pilgrims as well. And now I'd like to invite our final speaker, Diana Marin. Diana serves as the Program Manager and Young Adult Mobilization Coordinator of the Catholic Climate Covenant, where she organizes young leaders from across the United States to engage in faith-based climate action. Diana earned a Master of Divinity from Harvard Divinity School and previously served as theologian in resident for the Nuns and Nuns Land Justice Project, convening Catholic sisters and millennial nuns, in quotes, in conversations on land transitions rooted in ecological and racial healing. And Diana is going to be the one to share with us how we can engage, either join or start a pilgrimage of our own. So turn it over to you, Diana.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm really excited to share with you all as we conclude this webinar on how you can be part of a pilgrimage of hope for creation. So I'll share a little bit of background on the Pilgrimages of Hope for Creation initiative, and then I'll share more details on how you can be part of one. So we can move to the next slide. The Pilgrimages of Hope for Creation, it came about because we're seeing that in this moment of multiple crises converging in ecological crisis, that people really want to be involved in meaningful action, that folks are walking the streets talking about the importance of one being vocal and being representative of calls to change. But that also, like we had shared earlier at this call, we really want a movement rooted in hope. And so as we think about Pilgrimages of Hope for Creation, we're motivating both of these aspects of inviting people into action, but also doing so in a way that's really rooted in hope, that's rooted in our faith, that is motivated by the call to care for our common home. If we can move to our next one. So our vision as an initiative is to activate millions of US Catholics to reverse climate change and to care for our common home, people and planet. And this is a vision that we see as possible and that is already being done in so many corners of our church. And we want to bring and uplift a spotlight on the role of US Catholics in being vocal, being present, being witnesses of caring for our common home. So if we move to our next slide, we'll see that this year is a has a convergence of three important anniversaries. It's, of course, a Jubilee year. And so it's a year where we go on pilgrimage. It's the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si, Pope Francis's landmark encyclical on caring for our common home. And it's the 800th anniversary of the Canticle of the Creatures, the prayer poem by St. Francis that reminds us that we are in a kinship with all of life, with the life that's more than just human, but we are siblings of creation. So this year, it's a particularly special year. And as we move to the next slide, we'll see that we came together, a group of over 20 collaborators across the Catholic world. These are some, you can see the logos of some of the groups that are part of this initiative. It ranges from Catholic Climate Covenant, the organization I work with, Catholic Relief Services, Catholic Charities USA, the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, Network Lobby, just a real range of Catholic organizations came together in an unprecedented collaboration. We really have never come together, a whole range of various Catholic organizations for this common goal of uplifting care for creation. So this is a sort of also a landmark moment in our church of how we are organizing and collaborating to uplift care for our common home. So now to get into a little bit more of the details of what is the Pilgrimages of Hope for Creation, I'll start with some dates. It takes place during the season of creation, which is coming up. It starts September 1st, to October 4th. That's the season of creation, with priority dates for pilgrimages on that final weekend of the season of creation, which is October 3rd, October 4th. That also coincides with the feast day of St. Francis. So pilgrimages to be taking place within that particular time frame. And what are the unifying elements of a pilgrimage? Two things, very simple. Walking outside, or like incorporating nature in some way, so being in the natural world, and utilizing the pilgrimage prayer or song that actually Marilyn Cott developed. And that's it. We have a prayer/song. You can sing it, you can pray it, and being in nature, walking outside, incorporating our common home in some way. That's all you need for it to be a pilgrimage of hope for creation under sort of our unifying elements. I'll share with you, already we have more than 100 pilgrimages registered, and we've already had 20 so far taking place. We've had some that include collaborations with Indigenous populations that took place in outside of Seattle in Washington. We had a group of Catholic sisters visit the site of an ecological disaster in East Palestine, Ohio, where there was a train wreckage a few years ago. In the Diocese of San Antonio, a group walked for 9 miles, picking up trash and caring for unhoused community. In the Diocese of San Bernardino, they celebrated Ascension Sunday outdoors at a nature preserve. Earlier this summer, we had 100 advocates travel to Capitol Hill in DC, and they distributed blessed copies of the encyclical Laudato Si to all 145 members of Congress. In Virginia, a summer camp developed a pilgrimage walk around the parish grounds for middle school students, a sort of meditative, reflective walk for them. And another pilgrimage that I'm excited to be part of is in collaboration with Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers, and we'll be bringing 14 young adults who work in creation care as advocates and organizers. We'll be traveling to Rome and Assisi in October as Jubilee Pilgrims of Hope. So I hope this gives you a sort of a look at what are the different types of pilgrimages that you might be inspired to lead or even to be part of. It can really be a range. And I've included a few photos on the next slide for you to get a sense of what it has looked like so far. Really, our goal, of course, as I mentioned before, is to connect Catholics and mobilize Catholics across the country, but also to build connections, to offer opportunities for ecological conversion, especially within your local community, to also grow the movement of Catholics who care about our common home, to continue building this coalition of individuals who do work for caring for creation, and to inspire other Catholics to join this work. Now, this is the way that you can get involved. So if we'll move to the next slide, we have a website with tons of information. I'll put it in the chat. It's catholicpilgrimsofhope.org. We have so many resources for how you can get involved. We also have a webinar series that takes place monthly. Our next webinar will be tomorrow. You're welcome to join. There are other calls that you can be part of if you're excited to be part of this or want to create a pilgrimage in your own community. I'll also share with you in the chat section of the website where you can see all of the events, all of the pilgrimages that have already registered. You can sort and see if there's going to be a pilgrimage near you in your community. So if you want to participate, you can just hop on in there and be part of one. And if you have any questions about the Pilgrimages of Hope for Creation initiative, if you're curious to learn more, you can feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to give you a little bit more information and see how you can be part of this initiative as well. And that's all on my end. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Diana. Wow, that was super, super inspiring. So much great information. And I want to let people know we will be doing a follow-up email. We'll have all that information and more. So yeah, just so that you know, you will be able to either join one, create one. I also wanted to mention when we, first this idea first came around, of course, the focus was on US Catholics and it was limited to the United States. But since then, a couple pilgrimages popped up overseas, and I checked out with Dan Mislove of the Catholic Climate Covenant, and he said it's fine if some of them are in solidarity in other places. So I want to mention that because I know we have some folks, some Maryknoll missioners on this call, and feel free to organize a pilgrimage as well wherever you are. But in addition, we really hope to hit all 50 states. I think Diana at one point let us know which states are still missing one. So we're doing a special kind of mission to reach as many places as possible and engage as many Catholics as possible in this. So again, thanks so much, and stay tuned for a follow-up. We might have time for well, we were hoping to have time for questions, but I'm kind of thinking it might not be possible because it's almost just 4 minutes to the end. So it might be hard to answer questions, but please feel free to send questions to us. If you want to put them in the chat here as well. We might not be able to answer them immediately, but we will follow up because we'll have a record of the chats. But we want to end with something very special. As Diana mentioned, we've created, all of us working together have created a beautiful toolkit. And one of the most special parts is the pilgrimage prayer. And I remember we were trying to decide who might do that. I immediately thought of Marilyn and reached out, and she immediately said she would do it. And so we're going to end this session in that lovely way. With 4 different slides, we'll be reading that pilgrimage prayer. I will begin, and then Marilyn, and then Mark, and we'll finish with Susan Gunn, who's the director of the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns, and she'll also end a little bit with some information for all of us. So I'll begin with the pilgrimage prayer. God in heaven, as we begin our journey today, we pray that you will accept the efforts we make on this pilgrimage. We offer it in praise of you and with love for all that you have created. Be our companion along the way, our guide at the crossroads, our strength in weariness, our defense in danger, our shelter in heat, and cold, our light in darkness, our comfort in discouragement.
Open our hearts to everything that we encounter, to see you in our human brothers and sisters, and in every being which you have made, for all things speak of you. Help us to understand your will and to follow it with courage, confidence, and joy.
We pray that with your grace and guidance, we will share your good news with every creature and become agents of reconciliation and healing for all creation. May our witness be a leaven of authentic hope, the harbinger of the new heavens and the new earth, which you have in store for us. Help us to remember that this pilgrimage is just one step on our journey to you.
We pray in a special way for our new Pope Leo and for his intentions. Give him the strength and wisdom he needs to guide your pilgrim church on earth. We ask this through Christ our Lord, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Amen. I want to offer a great thanks to our panelists for their willingness to share themselves so openly and so deeply. I personally am moved. My spirit is uplifted and just left with so many things to think about welcoming pilgrims at our borders and all those who are seeking. And I want to just repeat in the chat the website that Deanna shared. So you can see CatholicPilgrimsofHope.org. And then, of course, to keep up with the Maryknoll Missioners as well as the Maryknoll affiliates on what we're doing to support not only this campaign, but others for peace and social justice. I want to offer our website as well, Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns. So it's maryknollogc.org, and you could sign up to receive our scripture reflections written by missioners and affiliates for each Sunday's gospel reading, as well as our weekly action alerts, and we have a newsletter every 2 months. So thanks to your support, we are in solidarity with one another, with the teachings that Jesus gave to us to be this pilgrim church on earth, and together we walk in hope. So thank you so much. Please do share this recording. I will be sending this to all who registered, and it sits on our YouTube channel, Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.